Hello and welcome to this review of Agatha Christie's The Sittaford Mysteries. So the last book I read was fun in its own way, but The Winds of Heliopolis had many of those characteristics common to books whose authors are starting out and haven't really thought things through. I needed a well-experienced, easy to read book as a follow-up, and Agatha Christie never disappoints. The Sittaford Mystery is one that's recently come into my collection. I am collecting Agatha Christie. I am trying to get all of her novels, preferably in Fontana. These beautiful little editions that are quite common in Australia and I believe the United Kingdom. In this one we've got some spectacular artwork. We've got that skull with what I think are bluebells coming out of the hollows. You've got cut grass, not just grass, but cut grass underneath. And you've got some gorgeous stippling at the top that fades into the text. So who did this artwork? Well, Fontana never tells you, but a certain amount of online research suggests to me that this is the cover art of Martin Blake. And there is an MB initials down there in the corner that you can see. Martin Blake apparently took over from a long run of Tom Adams doing the covers for Agatha Christie. So this one is an 80s edition, but the Sittaford Mystery was originally copyright from 1931. So before World War II, but after World War I. I think that some of Christie's best writing comes from that period. She's got new creative characters. The books tend to be larger and not better plotted, because all of her books are quite well plotted, but more, not filler, but they just seem more rounded than some of her later books, which she was really dashing them off. Coming from 1930 or 31, we're looking at a book that in about 5 years will be a historic, it will be an antique. It's nearly 100 years old. And as a consequence of that, you've got some things in the writing that stand out. Some of them are quaint, some of them are quirky, some of them are just weird to us in the 2025s. 26. It's almost 26. So, for example, in this tiny village of Sittaford, it's not even a village, it's got blacksmiths. Working blacksmiths is the main feature. You know, that's kind of antiquated in itself and quite charming. There's only about a dozen people living there, and one of them is Mr. Duke, who everyone suspects was in trade. No one really knows. He may not be a real gentleman. He may have been in trade. And so there's dark butterings about his back as to whether he's a real gentleman. And that is cute and of its time, the idea that someone who actually had to work for a living instead of living off the interest on their investments is somehow less good than others. It was still around in the 30s, which is funny. There are a number of terms that I did not get, and some of which are totally impossible to Google. For example, and the ones that the author clearly expected their reader to know automatically what they were talking about, but I didn't. For example, what is a British warm? Some of my viewers are British. Do you know what a British warm is? I don't. Is it a coat? Maybe it's a coat. There's also a couple of things that may be considered a little bit less savoury. For example, that N-word that was obliterated from the cover of one of her novels and turned into "and then there were 9." Well, the N-words in here, there's a few racial slurs on servants that aren't of English origin. Sorry. And there's a few other things. But overall, for a 30s book, in terms of aging, it really hasn't done that badly. Certainly the attitudes of the characters are not that terrible. Yes, women didn't have the same place in society that they do today. If that's going to bother you, then this is probably not the book for you. But I suspect that very few books written in 1930 were. So in this one, we are introduced to the Inspector Narracott. I think this is the first Inspector Narracott. And what Christie does with him is actually quite interesting. He investigates the murder, and he's the primary thread throughout, but he's not the character that we spend the most time with. The characters we spend the most time with are the reporter, Charles, and the fiancée, Emily, whom initially I found intensely annoying. I thought that Christie was trying to do here what she did so well in The Secret Adversary with Tommy and Tuppence, but unsuccessfully. But Emily is a very modern girl in that she's just going out and getting what she wants, which is to save her fiancé from being convicted of murder, which, let's not forget, 1930, conviction of murder, you get hung. That's it. So yes, there's that. The way she goes about it, some of her little feminine wiles may be a bit on the nose in our era, but it's still a good premise. It's well situated, it's nicely written, and very enjoyable. So what is it actually about? The back cover could tell you that perhaps better than me, but basically in the town of Sittaford we find out that Colonel Trevelyan has let out his big house to Mrs. and Miss Willis from South Africa, who've taken it for the winter, which is batshit crazy because you're going to be so isolated and all that sort of thing. However, they've chosen to do that. The excuse is they like the moors and the outdoors, and that a cold Christmas is what they're after, because the Miss Willis keeps claiming she's never seen snow, etc., etc. Everyone thinks they're a bit odd, but they're very sociable. They keep asking people around to tea and play Agatha Christie kind of games, like, I don't know, bridge, and I think bridge is one of them. I can't remember those games. Anyway, never played any of them. Anyway, Captain Trevelyan moved out of his house into a small rental house not too far away. On one fateful night, everyone mobile who's left in Sittaford is gathered around the table, and instead of playing bridge, which someone can't play, or another card game, they decide to do a table tapping, a seance. Now, this sequence is good because it betrays... Agatha Christie herself had a fascination with psychic phenomena and occult tea parties of her era. And it was a very big thing back in those days. One of the characters, a Mr. Can't remember his name. Smaller character. Simmons, maybe? Is quite interested in psychic phenomena and has written a paper. Anyway, they decide to do this table tapping thing, and they all sit around the table, and it's tap for yes, something else for no, blah, blah, blah. And eventually, and one can only imagine how eventually, the spirit taps out the words Captain Trevelyan dead. And then, much more slowly, murder. And everyone thinks, oh, that's a terribly bad joke, it's in bad taste, everyone's a bit rattled. But around the table is Captain Barnaby, the long-term friend of Captain Trevelyan, and after a while he decides to go and see if he's okay. Now, it's a Friday night, and every Friday night, it's not Barnes, Barnaby, that's it, Captain Barnaby, normally on Friday walks to Captain Trevelyan. It's a 2-hour walk, and on Tuesdays, Captain Trevelyan comes to see him, 2-hour walk, 2 or 3 hour walk, so 12 each way, I don't know. It's a long walk anyway. However, on this particular night, Barnaby hasn't gone over there because it's snowing. It's snowing so heavily that he thought he might not be able to get through. And indeed, Sittaford is totally cut off. You can't drive out or anything. So you're creating this limited pool of suspects right there, and in a good way. After the table tapping murder exposition, Barnaby, however, insists he is going, and the people try to talk him out of it. No one offers to go with him, and he sets off. 3 hours later, in the dark and the snow, he makes it to Captain Trevelyan's house. He finds the back window has been broken, and Trevelyan... No, he doesn't. He finds that he can't get in. So he goes down to the main town of Exmouth, X something or other, and collects the police superintendent and the doctor, and they go out to see if Trevelyan is okay. Trevelyan is not okay. He is dead on the floor. He has been coshed with a sandbag that he uses to keep the drafts out from coming into the door. back window is broken. Who could have done it? Well, no one in Sittaford could have, because they were locked in 2 or 3 hours away, and the time when he died, no, none of them could have been there. So in comes Inspector Narracott, and he starts uncovering who the beneficiaries are, what the advantages, and who could have had the influence. They eventually end up arresting one of Captain Trevelyan's 2 nephews. He's got 2 nephews and 1 niece. One of the nephews is in Australia, but is he? And the niece is married and wasn't available, but was she? And this one, Joe Pearson, had come to see his uncle that night and was known to have been on site. So it's his fiancée, Emily, who comes down, determined to prove that it wasn't him, because Joe couldn't hurt a fly, being indecisive and all that sort of thing. She loves him anyway, and she's got every intention of marrying him, and had even before he inherited a significant amount of money from his uncle. So I loved the way Christie's fascination with the occult came through with the table tapping. I love the way her skepticism came through, because while it's obvious to anyone reading in 2025, the first thing you're going to suspect is that someone who was there knew it was happening. But that's not the first thing that comes to their mind. A couple of people go, well, I never believed in spiritualism. How else could it have happened? And it's a lot of fun. So the convincing case of spiritualism, of course, is proven not to be a convincing case of spiritualism. I think this is one of her longer and better written books. And it's got a lot of small, interesting side bits that you don't see in some of her much later work, but which make it a much more rounded book. This is a good little mystery for anyone who likes reading mysteries from the 30s. It doesn't have any of the tropes you would necessarily associate with Christie, except that it's a good and satisfying story. You don't have any of the characters you would normally associate with Agatha Christie, and not the stereotypes either. So, what else? I did have a couple of other things I was going to say about it. Oh yes, small details that help round it out are Captain Trevelyan. The name Trevelyan is apparently Cornish. Is it Cornish? It comes from a specific part of England that I don't know much about. Let's just put it that way. And during the course of it, someone's talking to the fiancé, whose surname I think is Treffus or something like that. And they just have this little chat about regional names and where they come from. And there's small things like that that make England 1930s seem very rounded and very enjoyable, in a way that, again, I don't think can be associated with an Agatha Christie from the later years. So, if you don't think you like Agatha Christie, or if you know you don't like Agatha Christie, but you need to read an Agatha Christie, then I would strongly recommend the Sittaford Mystery, if anything I've said sounds interesting. If you're just a bit curious, these early ones are good ones to start with as well. So, is it Christmas when this is posted, or is it after Christmas? Probably after Christmas. I hope you had a wonderful Christmas, and I hope that you took your food coma to the couch and lay down and read a good book. Bye.